excellence. If lack of PowerPoints is an indication of quality, whether good or bad quality, I don't know. If that's an indication of quality, this is a session full of quality. These people need no images to bolster their arguments.
Thanks a lot.
Except for Adam. But he's only doing it because I gave him images, so he feels he has to show them. So it's completely my fault. First up, our very own Cameron Doig. Known well to all of you. He's a great house sitter. What else can I say about him? And he will be telling us today all about humanity in Homer's Odyssey.
Thank you. It's good to be back. I also think it's pretty cool that some of the stuff that I'm going to be sort of glossing over, Laura went into in a little bit more depth, so that's very cool. Also, if I may, I hope I'm not going to embarrass you here by saying this, but I do believe Laura just won the Joseph P. Culleton Award for the Humanities. Something with, yes. Fierce competition. Adam and myself both entered essays, so it was, she had some fierce competition, and she came out ahead, so congratulations to my friend and colleague, Laura. I'm here to talk about the Odyssey today. I figured I would pick a topic that you don't necessarily need to know what I'm talking about to figure out what I'm talking about. Excuse me, just 1 second. I'm going to get a lemony goodness. So the Odyssey, of Homer, of course, is the most extant Greek epic to survive to the current day. It represents a triumph in what it means to be human. The presence of Olympian deities is sparse, as the epic poem is more concerned with the dealings and communications of the human world. To begin my analysis, I will examine human characteristics in contrast to the gods, to display how gods are less omnipresent than one might imagine, and that humans are interested primarily with ideas of hearth and the home. Next, I will employ Levi-Straussian dialogue to examine elements of the raw versus the cooked. These are technical terms, especially as seen in the Phaeacians and the Cyclopes, to indicate how being on either side of the spectrum, too far on either side of the spectrum, can be an impediment to proper human activity. Lastly, I will discuss the abilities of the mind as expressed by the Odyssey, in order to illustrate how the smart are rewarded and the stupid are punished. In doing so, I will show that the Odyssey is concerned with the activities of mortals and their relations with deities who are less than omnipotent, that the epic is interested in outlining follies of being too far on either side of socially acceptable constructs, while also demonstrating that foolish humans will suffer due consequences. First of all, in the Odyssey, it is still possible for individuals to communicate with deities. Of course, Athene is the patron of Odysseus, but she rarely appears to him as herself. She's always in disguise. Actually, the epic concludes with Athene mediating between the household of Odysseus and the kin of the slain suitors, while likened to the appearance of Mentor. Although humans are no longer in a direct relation of hospitality with the gods, aspects of human community life are still aided by the divine. Similarly, Odysseus believes that Zeus is the source of his sorrow until Leucothea mentions that it is Poseidon specifically. Odysseus now knows that the earth shaker is causing his grief, but only because a well-meaning deity told him so. The communication that would allow Odysseus to know this otherwise does not exist. Shortly after leaving Calypso, Poseidon is returning from a visit with the Ethiopians, and he catches sight of Odysseus on his raft, and he sends Odysseus off course again. This episode yields two interesting points about the gods. First of all, the gods of the Odyssey do not seem to have a ubiquitous presence involving an all-seeing, all-knowing status. Poseidon, merely distracted by dining with the Ethiopians, does not notice Odysseus being helped on his way back home by Calypso. Accordingly, Hermes at one point complains to Calypso that he had to travel all the way there over salty waters. These are two examples of how gods in the Odyssey do not appear to be omnipresent as one might think a deity to be. The other point worth noticing is that the Ethiopians mentioned are unlike other mortals, and that they actually dine with the gods. They belong to the world off the map, where it is still possible to have relationships of hospitality with the gods. Thus, these people are not the same as the Ethiopians of the historical world. They are mythical, irregular mortals. By the time the Odyssey was written, people were no longer in union with the gods as they believed they had been in previous ages. The Phaeacians are another such people in the Odyssey that have a closer union with the gods. The Phaeacian king Alcinous once remarks that sometimes when they offer grand sacrifice to the gods, that the gods are sometimes present, and if they are, they're never in disguise. Nevertheless, Athene is disguised as a little girl while aiding Odysseus to get to the royal house of Alcinous, illustrating that face-to-face communication is quite rare. So that's just a little examination of the gods. Now I'm going to talk about a little bit of what actually makes humans humans, not just, and sort of what separates us from the gods. In Book 5, lines 81 to 85, Calypso's island, Odysseus is found by Hermes. He's found crying there, looking out at the sea and weeping. Calypso does not understand that he has a human desire to be among his family and companions. Calypso asks Odysseus to stay, trying to influence him, mentioning dangers he's still fated to endure en route to Ithaca. She offers immortality and the endless embrace of a goddess. Odysseus politely declines, explaining that he desires to get home, he desires his nostos, perils notwithstanding. So Calypso provides Odysseus with some tools to make a raft and send him on his journey. Something we should note, Calypso is one of 3 females who can stand to impede the nostos of Odysseus by offering sex, the other 2 being Nausicaa and Circe. So they all offer sex, which can threaten nostos, it can threaten your homecoming. Speaking of sex, at one point, Calypso lambasts Hermes and the gods of Mount Olympus for their philandering. She mentions how Demeter and Jason are lying in the thrice-plowed field and other divine mortal relations. So Calypso grasps the gender gap, that Zeus gets his lovers, males get their lovers, but she does not get hers. Still, she does not grasp the human desire for hearth and home. To the deity, the issue is desires of the appetite, not those of a more intimately important filial nature. In accordance with this, well, in the hospitality of the Phaeacians, Odysseus sings of his wanderings. He sings of lotus eaters encountered when he sent his companions to discover what men, what eaters of bread, might live in the country. His companions happen on the lotus eaters who feed the lotus plant to them. With the plant consumed, the companions of Odysseus desire nothing else but to sit and eat the plant. They forget their home and they forget their nostos. Since it is characteristically human to regard oneself as having a purpose, the stagnant life of eating lotus and never thinking of home violates themes of nostos in the Odyssey. Odysseus has to literally drag his friends back to the fast ships and physically bind them to prevent their return to sit and eat in stagnation. Keep in mind, these are the very same men who cried for home and complained to Odysseus while stuck in the abode of Circe. In addition, these lotus-eating creatures can be viewed as an extreme version of the Phaeacians, of whom I'll speak more in a bit, and that they do no more than sit and eat. They are content with food, and they are totally purposeless. Moreover, it is typical of the human condition to never be fully secure with your situation in life. Hence, the epic concludes without absolution or resolution. The miasma, the blood pollution, is still looming. There's no formal truce. Similarly, Tiresias, at one point when Odysseus goes to the underworld, Tiresias tells him how he can placate the god that is angry at him and fully achieve his nostos, though the placation does not actually occur in the Odyssey segment of the epic cycle. So we can conclude, in the world of the Odyssey, humans can communicate with some deities, but only in certain cases, and never face to face, especially with the major deities. We also can say that gods, like humans, are not ubiquitous, and that what sets humans apart from the gods is a desire for hearth and home, and desires of filial relations, not simply of the appetite. These differences between humans and immortals are of course mythological. That is not to say that they lack relevance. Human mythologies and tenets often bear great relevance, much like how some religions or institutions oppose homosexuality out of concern for the population. The Odyssey seeks to outline proper human mantras and conditions which will benefit the society, such as proper marital and family relations. The following section, therefore, will deal with polar oppositions interested in what is truly best for human societies if they are to flourish. So, that being said, I will now turn my attention to discussions of the raw versus the cooked. These are terms coined by the famous 20th century anthropologist Claude Levi-Strauss. By wanderings, Odysseus and his companions are subjected to a wide variety of beings that can be seen as polar opposites from each other, from other civilizations, and which contrast well with other societies off the map. Levi-Strauss expressed that mythology holds a host of figures which represent polar oppositions. One purpose of mythology, of course, being to mediate between bipolar opposites and resolve angst, like how the human nervous system mediates between mind and experience. Levi-Strauss invoked the image of a skate or a stingray, which at times is either huge as seen from the front or seen from the side is completely narrow. These are the two sort of polar oppositions, and mythology mediates between the two. In any case, for this point, the Phaeacians, whom I've already mentioned briefly, they are an excellent starting point. They are humans who have replanted their civilization far away from other men who eat bread, in a closed society that can be seen as hyper-cooked. Battered Odysseus gets to Scheria, first kissing the grain-giving soil. Of course, this mention of grain is significant. In the land of the Phaeacians, they have bread, as some is presented to Odysseus at the palace in Book 7. They nevertheless position themselves far away from other eaters of bread, and do not associate with the outside world. When Odysseus confronts the maiden Nausicaa and her retinue, she reminds them that they need not flee, as no man could come to the Phaeacians and bring attack, as they are dear to the immortals, live far away from other civilizations, and only mix with each other. Their social construct is thus extremely closed, bread eaters are not. They therefore have no trade deals with other mortals, no marriage pacts, and no proper human communication. As for their gods, Nausicaa speaks of the precincts of Athene and Poseidon, two of the three Olympians to have a main presence in the Odyssey, save, of course, Hermes, who appears merely at the behest of Zeus, and occasional mentions of Apollo. Their town has an assembly and human institutions, yet they are only concerned with themselves. They never need to endure hardships for their food. They appear devoid of purpose. The Odyssey speaks of their orchards, continuously in perfect blossom, with apple growing on apple and fig on fig. Since all is perfectly in order for the Phaeacians, they do not need to engage in political endeavors of any means outside their closed society. They do not associate with other communities, despite their maritime prowess. It's significant because it seems rather pointless and perfunctory to be great oarsmen when they shun outside contact. This is an episode of opposition occurring vis-a-vis technology, and that the Phaeacians use their ships to isolate themselves, whereas in fulfillment of prophecy, Odysseus will use a Phaeacian ship to get home and re-establish himself in his community. Thus, the Phaeacians are too cooked and over-civilized. It almost makes me think of Brave New World, but that's probably just because I read it recently, and it seems to resonate in a lot of stuff. But another experience for Odysseus and his companions involves Polyphemus. He is, of course, one of the Cyclopes, and he is a great example of what Levi-Strauss labeled raw. First of all, the Odyssey states that the Cyclopes neither plow with their hands nor plant anything. They have no institutions, no assemblies, and no councils. Each does the law for his own wives and children, and cares nothing about the others. They desire neither to be a technological civilization, nor to visit other civilizations, seen in their lack of tools and lack of ships. In this sense, the Cyclopes are well contrasted with the Phaeacians. Phaeacians, of course, being excellent seafarers and possessors of technology. The former having no interest in seafaring and devoid of technology. Yet both are closed societies that live isolated from others. The point is that whether or not a society is too open or too closed, whether or not a society is too cooked or too raw, societal relations must always remain in an open construct. The term raw is exceptionally appropriate for Polyphemus, as his food is literally very raw. He drinks pure undiluted milk. This, of course, after brain-bashing two companions of Odysseus off the rocks of his cave, killing them like puppies, and then eating them raw, which, for some reason, I always laugh when I read that part. It sounds funny, like puppies. In any case, his eating procedure is completely bereft of technology, totally raw. By contrast, the king of the Lystrigones, Antiphates, this is another society off the map, he also eats some of Odysseus' companions, but he uses tools and technology to hunt humans, and he had just come from his citizen assembly. While the Levi-Strauss are still off the map, possessing technology and an assembly, they are not as hyper-raw as the Cyclopes. Of course, this aspect of technology is crucial in the Odyssey, as seen again when Odysseus derives a plan to blind the Cyclops and abscond to his ship. The plan involves the driving of a red-hot poker into the eye of Polyphemus, and is technological in two main ways. First, Odysseus uses whatever is at his disposal to blind the Cyclops, thus demonstrating metis, the quality which so endears Athene to him. Moreover, the simile at the point of blinding invokes the image of a blacksmith, as the sharp stick sizzles his eyes, similar to sounds in a smithy as a blacksmith tempers iron. This is a clear evocation of human technologies. It is also worth noting that the branch used is that of an olive tree, the tree sacred to Athene, the gift she offered to Athens in order to become its patron. One should also remember that one of Athene's roles is to master or subdue the realms of Poseidon, such as with ships sailing across the sea. Her technologies are at odds with nature, just as Odysseus is at odds with Polyphemus, who is of course Poseidon's son. Therefore, there's a clear episode involving metis and strength and technology, overcoming the raw world of Polyphemus and the Cyclopes. It's also highly significant, of course, that these two deities, Athene and Poseidon, have a strong presence in the epic poem. More about Polyphemus now. His domicile relays information about the land of the Cyclopes. His property is thrice described as having a fenced yard with high walls. This is in Odyssey, Book 9, 215, 239, and 338. Very high fence, high walls, illustrating that neighbors are not neighbors in the communal sense. Polyphemus' father Poseidon does care for him, and he does take revenge on Odysseus, but Polyphemus lives alone in solitude. Odysseus describes him as a monstrous wonder, not a bread-eater, a wooded mountain peak that stands alone apart from the others. Whilst hiding in the cave of Polyphemus, Odysseus is of course spotted, and his origin is required forthwith. This, however, is at odds with guest-host relations in epic, and that it is only appropriate to inquire of a man's name and country after he eats and imbibes. Polyphemus doesn't care about hospitality, though. He thinks Odysseus and his men are pirates bringing evil to alien people. Now, in the light of the pirate-style raids of Odysseus against the Caconians, this is not altogether inaccurate. Odysseus, of course, had then arrived stealing women, and now he expects total hospitality from creatures off the map. Regardless, the Odyssey expounds what is right and proper in the Greek world. In antiquity, bear in mind, there's no hotels. Being alone is very dangerous. Offering a stranger refuge could easily be the difference between life and death. Refuge, then questions and chat. We'll get to all that later. Though Odysseus may be wrong to expect hospitality in this situation, Polyphemus stands as an example of one who has no interest in such human maxims. And for him, what's his idea of hospitality? Of course, he thinks Odysseus' name is nobody, but probably one of my favorite lines is, "I shall eat nobody before his friends, and that shall be my guest gift to him." That's what Polyphemus thinks about hospitality. He's totally raw. Polyphemus can be likened to one side of the ray skate previously mentioned, of which Levi-Strauss spoke in Myth and Meaning, and that he is the polar opposite of a cooked or hyper-cooked civilization. The fact that he eats humans is especially alarming, as such an action would be punishable by the gods in a human civilization. Polyphemus, the son of Poseidon, is free from such concerns. Keep in mind, the Greeks considered themselves at odds with nature. They felt as though it was their enemy. The Cyclops, thus, is an embodiment of nature most alarming. He eats humans raw. No fire, no tools, no fear that he'll be stained with miasma or incur punishment. Polyphemus in this light can be understood as something of a primal fear of the human psyche. My interpretation is he's the boogeyman. He's the man in the closet. That's what I think. These elements of raw versus the cook could just as easily be applied to a modern society, especially in terms of societies which try to isolate themselves from others. But no matter how much emphasis there is on an increased global unity, there will always be a pushback from institutions or cults interested in remaining closed off from the rest of the world. As Levi-Strauss remarked, wherever old issues are settled, new ones will inevitably arise, and our thoughts and institutions will never be without gaps. Lastly, a brief section here, I will turn my discussion to issues of stupidity versus intelligence in the Odyssey. Homeric epic strongly remarks on the stupidity of people, especially groups, and such stupidity deserves to be punished. For example, after escaping from the island of Polyphemus, Odysseus comes to the Aeolian island, home of Iolus, son of Hippotas. This deity Iolus is a minor deity in the epic and the controller of the winds. With his help, Odysseus almost gets home, but his companions fail to trust Odysseus. They grow suspicious that Odysseus is keeping gold and silver in the bag, so they open it, unleashing the winds of Aeolus and sending them all horribly off course again. One thing that can ruin nostos is aphrodie, stupidity, which is contrasted with phrenes and intelligence. Being stupid can consistently ruin one's ability to get home and achieve nostos. Unfortunately for Odysseus, his men are stupid, and they open the bag of winds. Now, Odysseus may be brash at times. He might act like a pirate and a housecrasher. But his mates are stupid because it is not their right in the first place to look in the bag. It is not their right to administer spoils. They have no right looking in the first place. And for this, their nostoi will be taken away, as all will perish but Odysseus once back out at sea. In keeping with this, and forgive my Greek if I'm off, tastalia, or blind folly, infects the suitors, which we heard a little bit about earlier, infects the suitors and is the cause of their demise. Much like Odysseus's men display aphrodie and impede Odysseus's homecoming, the suitors incumb atastalia, which effectively hinders Penelope and Telemachus's ability to operate their house in proper function. In each case, the stupid people will be punished. Just as one needs a noos, which is a good intending sense, to achieve proper nostos, lacking noos is a good way to wake up dead. It is thus fitting that Athene likens herself to Mentor, whose name reflects menos, meaning strength of body and mind. This is what Telemachus is striving for, while the haughty suitors infringe on his household. Likewise, while Odysseus is battling waves and rocks, Athene saves him by giving him forethought. She gives him the ability to think ahead and grab onto certain rocks, I believe. It's actually been a while since I read it. This is interesting because Pandora also gives to humans elpis, this ability to look ahead. Now, although the context is different, it is still significant that a human is given a gift by a deity which relates to abilities of the mind and abilities to look ahead for the benefit of the humans involved. So we need to be wise. We need to possess forethought. We need to not manifest blind folly if we as humans are to truly flourish. I think this is something that my personal hero Carl Sagan would have agreed with quite strongly. In sum, the Odyssey is very keen on discussing mortals and their potential, more so than it cares about the abilities or lack thereof pertaining to the immortals. Along with outlining certain factors that truly make humans human, the epic details polar opposites, which are meant to articulate problems which the Greeks would have found with civilizations too far from their own, such as may have existed in previous ages or times. Lastly, the Odyssey is a poem which illustrates the stupidity of humans in groups, vis-a-vis the intelligence which can be present and fostered in decent individuals. Thank you all very much.
Questions? There are no stupid questions, by the way. Stupid suitors and...
This is a smart group, not this kind of group.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
Like, we talked about the gods like not being omnipresent, omniscient, and how like the other societies except for the Greeks, you know, had the gods walking amongst them. Would that more show like a passing of time, that the golden age has passed for the Greeks, that the gods are no longer welcome? Like they don't see the Greeks as worthy of them walking amongst them, instead of like just being like the polar opposites of like these other places are more holier than now, I guess. I think that shows like more of a passing of time, that they're like the Greeks don't deserve the gods' presence anymore.
I would say it definitely shows the passing of time and the age of heroes being over. I don't know if it's so much that society's off the map or holier than now. I wouldn't be able to comment on any sort of that aspect of it. I haven't looked into it, but it definitely has to do with it's almost like Old Testament versus New. You know, at the beginning of the Old Testament, there is actually this communication with the gods. So it almost seems like almost a motif, almost this loss of a communication with deities through some sort of a folly or what have you.
I wonder what you make of Odysseus actually giving Polyphemus his name as he sails away. That has always struck me as an uncharacteristically stupid thing for Odysseus to do.
Yeah. I honestly, I agree. I haven't really tried to analyze it. It does seem a ridiculously silly thing to do. Why he would, I couldn't even begin to comment. It perplexed me when I read it. He seems like he's so smart. He's always thinking ahead. He always knows what to do. He can do anything on like the right then and there. And then he just totally does this stupid thing. It's like if you were to rob a bank and then run away and take off your mask as you get out the door right away. Like, you're going to get caught. You know, why would you do that? So as for why, I really have no idea.
Crucial to the plot line of the whole Odyssey.
Well, it is.
Propels the narrative.
Exactly.
Who can then set in motion the whole problems of the return.
Maybe it says that being human,
So it's
even the
just a
smartest
plot
of us will eventually succumb to that temptation just the one time.
And
Well, he's so pleased with himself, isn't he? He's
Yes.
so
That's the thing. I think it is the pride, if anything else. I think there's a movie, I can't remember what movie it was. It was really well done, and somebody at one point says to a drug dealer, says, that's the problem with drug dealers. You're all so proud of what you can do, but you're not allowed to tell anybody.
Yeah.
It's that same sort of a thing, you know?
So he wants to get caught in a way.
He at least wants it, yeah, he wants the notoriety, he wants the fame, perhaps.
Like the stupid criminals you hear about.
Whoa.
Like the guy whose ID
It's
doesn't
sort of like military encounter, isn't it, on the battlefield, where a victorious warrior needs to stand up and pronounce that I have defeated, my enemy. So Odysseus is perhaps taken over by that mentality at that point. Very much the personal kletos that you would gain from a noble act, such as flying to the Cyclops. I thought your analysis of the Cyclops was very interesting with the rule of the cook.
Love Levi-Strauss.
So just one little thing, you mentioned that Cyclops has a wife and kids.
Did I say that?
No.
Oh no, it's just
Some
in
of them do.
the land of the Cyclopes,
So
each
they're not
is their own
totally
sort of.
raw. I mean,
They have
sort
little
of
bits,
words,
yeah.
As in Aristotle, the start of political society is the formation of the oikos, which then leads to the formation of polis. So they're not quite totally.
Yeah, they're also when Odysseus starts to blind him, he starts screaming, and the other Cyclops do come, but Odysseus thought ahead and he had told him that his name is Nobody, so he says, "Oh, nobody is torturing me," and they'll say, "Okay, well, we're going home," and they leave. But so there is some aspects of community, but it's for fenced high walls, it's almost like gated communities or something like that, where your neighbors, in a sense, constructed kind of way.
Giant mountains.
I have a question, but I don't think it's a good one.
You always say that when I present.
I feel you need to ask a question of each speaker, otherwise I'm letting them down. It's tangential and it's vague to boot, but since you're talking about stupid suitors, I'm always reminded when I think of the suitors of one really weird and surreal episode. I think it's towards the end of book 15 or 16, just before Telemachus gets home anyway, the omen of the laugh. Do you know that?
I don't recall.
The meat turns to blood in their mouths. There's this spooky laugh in the halls, and they just can't read the omen that the blood will be upon them.
I don't recall that. I haven't read the Odyssey since last year.
Okay.
So.
I remember this vaguely from about 20 years ago, so I need to look it up myself. But it always struck me as being surreal and spooky, and more than anything else, pointing out the fact that suitors cannot read obvious omens. Even before that gloomy seer Theoclymenus comes to Ithaca. Even without him there, they're just too dense to pick up on this strange thing. I'm sorry, that's very vague.
No, it almost makes me think of The Shining, where there's
the
blood coming off the elevator.
It's a Stephen King moment. It's a Stephen King moment. And they're just too dumb to know that they're doomed.
Well, they're too drunk, perhaps.
Yeah.
They think they're on PCP or something's going on.
Or they don't even understand that Penelope's undoing the rule.
Yeah.
That's
Gee,
how,
that woman.
that's probably a good indicator of how stupid they are too, right?
But they're not yet married. I mean, they haven't seen their wife for
That's
years.
right. You don't know how fast it's supposed to be if you're doing it properly. They just know how long it would take them to make it.
Any further questions? All right. Well, thank you, Cameron.
Thank you.